Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist, DT from WX Risk, located here in Central Virginia, the captain of chaos, the colonel of confusion, the commander of catastrophe. Let's talk weather, which is probably the best topic in the whole world. The only thing that might be close to weather would be dinosaurs, but that's another video. Anyway, there's a picture of my smiling face here from Richmond, Virginia. And you can reach me through the email that way or through my Gmail account. And of course, you follow me on my Twitter page for operational weather in the eastern U.S. And there's the Facebook page. The topics here, we'll obviously talk about the tropics, the warm September into October. A lot of people are complaining about that, the developing drought over the southeastern U.S. and what have you. So there is a lot to talk about here, so let's get right into it. All right, here we're going to take a look at the conditions here since September 1st. And if it seems that it's been really dry and warm for September in the middle Atlantic region, you're not wrong. It really has been. And we can take a look at this data here quite nicely. Now, the image on the left is actual precipitation since September 1st. Now, obviously, down here in the eastern Carolinas, we had the impact of Dorian, as you can see, down in the eastern North Carolina areas. We can see in this area in here, we had Dorian obviously bringing the rain. And you can see the anomalies here on the right-hand side. This is percentages of normal. But you can see everybody else, it's been pretty dry. The dark red areas is 1/10 of an inch. And the other areas is 1/10 to a half inch. So it's been really dry in a lot of places. Not too bad in upper Pennsylvania, New York State, northern New England, but even dry there. But really, from the Pennsylvania Turnpike southward, and even a little bit into Jersey here in New York City, all the way down into Georgia and out towards Ohio and Kentucky, it has been very dry and really warm. We can see the temperature anomalies here. This is since September 1st. And the red blobs are 6 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, and the orange is 4 to 6 degrees. So it's been really warm, especially from I-95, let's say westward, since September 1st. This is the drought monitor map. In case you have not seen this, this is as of September 17th. I think this is last Thursday or something like that. And you can see that the drought has really picked up here over the last, I guess you can say in this whole area, over the last 2 weeks because of the dryness. It's also picked up somewhat in Texas as well, but mostly over the southeastern states has been a big increase. Now, a lot of people are wondering, they're seeing this trend. I've noticed comments on the Facebook page of people asking me, what's going on with September? It seems like September increasingly, every year after year, is warm and we don't really see autumn. And there is some truth behind that. If you take a look at, let's say, September's over the past 10 years, the one in the upper left, that's September last year, 2018. Look how warm it was, especially the eastern half of the country. Really warm. Some areas, if you call 6-7 degrees above normal in the southeastern states. The upper right image, that's September 2017. That was close to normal. The bottom one, September 2016. Again, a super warm September. Anyway you cut it. This here, and then you look at 2015, a pretty warm September nationwide. Now, the September of 2014 was close to normal, especially in the Midwest here, a little below normal. But look at 2013, cool on the East Coast, but most of the country had a warm September as well. And then if we look at next we can see 2012 and 2011, both of those Septembers were cooler than normal. But September 2010, again, warmer than normal except for Minnesota and the Dakotas. So there is no doubt that there is a trend here where September is becoming a continuation of August. Now, the good news is that when we're seeing this, you will notice the humidity is not as high. We're not getting nearly as many humid, sticky days. And the temperatures do drop off more at night. You're getting a lot of temperatures dropping down to 62, 64, 60 degrees, which is good sleeping weather, which is not a strain on the air conditioning or a strain on people. And you can go out and do things during the morning and the evening hours, even if it does get to 88 or 90 degrees. Now, the corollary to that, and this is interesting, is March. Now, March, of course, is the exact opposite of September. They're both equinox months. And what's happened is that the exact opposite is occurring with March. With March, we're seeing colder temperatures and more snow over the past 10 years. For example, here on this slide, you can see on this image, it's a March of 2019. And you can see it was colder than normal most of the country, especially over the plains and the upper Midwest. The upper right image, 2018, the Midwest and the East Coast had a cold March. Now, 2017 was a little different. New England had a chilly March, but most of the country was pretty warm. This is 2016. March was a very warm for 2016, but look at 2015. Cold in the Northeast and the Midwest, Ohio Valley. And then 2014, we had a very cold March, as you recall. So, and then we look at finally, we can see 2013. Look how cold the March was then, and part of that severe winter. Now, 2012, that was part of the drought winter of 2011 and 12. So we obviously had a super warm drought year. That was the year we had the drought. But then in 2011, again, cold to the north, near normal over the rest of the country. So definitely March is continuing a trend from February, and we're getting more snow and colder temperatures, while September, in my view, and you may not agree with this, but I think the data supports this, is becoming a continuation of August with a little less humidity and cooler temperatures at night. Okay, I thought that was pretty interesting and worth taking a look at here. Okay, and also, by the way, one more, I think I have one more slides. There's 2010 March, which was warm in the north, but cool in the south. That was El Nino year. And then you can see 2009 and 2008, also another cool March. Excuse me. So here we have our next image. Is this the actual current pattern? And this is a very convoluted pattern, so let's take a look at this for a minute. We can see several important features. Obviously, this here is this huge ridge right here. You can see the 591 decameter line there. Very strong ridge. Here's our trough off the coast, which is going to pull Jerry northward. There's a next trough coming in from the west coast. You can see that here. And there's another one dropping down from the Gulf of Alaska. So these troughs are coming in here and here and here. And as they come into the west coast, they're causing these ridges to build over the eastern United States. The jet stream is doing this. So the rain avoids the eastern third of the country. The drought begins to build. The temperatures stay above normal. Now let's take a look briefly at our tropics here. Now this is the sea surface temperatures on this map. And this is interesting for a number of different reasons. First, the main thing that stands out is look how warm the eastern Pacific is. This is clearly the most important feature here going into the autumn and potentially into the winter. Now, what happens is that this huge pool of warm water often anchors the jet stream pattern and causes the pattern to repeat. So, I'm going to jump the slide again. So when we see that, it's going to want to keep the overall pattern with the ridge in the eastern Pacific. And what that does is that it supports the trough over the west coast, and that supports a ridge over the east coast. Now, if this were to shift, and it will only take a little bit to shift, the pattern can turn dramatically colder in a very few days or only a week. If we get the trough on the west coast, let's say that trough were to leave, that would change the pattern fundamentally. And that's going to happen eventually, but not yet for a while. And we'll get into a little later here. I'm going to show you how this whole pattern can change. But the important thing to notice is this enormous pool of really warm water, which you can see right here. This is the feature I'm talking about, and how that's going to anchor the jet stream pattern for most of the autumn and probably into the winter. Okay, latest topics here. We can see Jerry going out to sea. Here's Karen. I talked about Karen before. Remember on my the last note update I did on the Facebook page and on the website, you can see Karen there in the Caribbean. And then there's this new system way out here in the southwest for the tropical Atlantic. Now, I've seen other meteorologists that were saying a few days ago that the Cape Verde hurricane season is coming to an end. Clearly, that is not the case, not yet. Sometimes it ends in mid or late September. We're not seeing any signs of that yet. So let's take a look at these systems here and see what's happening. Now, clearly, this obviously we can see Jerry is so long, Jerry, heading out to sea. Probably going to pass west of Bermuda and then out into the open Atlantic Ocean. Now, why is it going to do that? Well, this image explains very clearly why. We can see a number of different features here. This is for Monday afternoon, and the big trough, we can see right here, this is what's going to capture, this is Jerry, and then this big trough here moving through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, that's going to come through, it's going to grab the system and pull it off to the coast like this. There's another trough right here, and this is the system in the far eastern Atlantic Ocean, and then there's, of course, this Karen down in here. So these big troughs coming through the Great Lakes, that's going to grab Jerry and pull it out to sea. We'll see that in just a minute. If we look at the surface map from the European model, all right, this first image in the upper left, this is 24 hours. This is, maps keep jumping around. This is for Monday morning, and you can see the J stands for Jerry, there's Karen, and there's the L storm. I presume it's going to be the L storm here. So there's a Jerry, and there's Karen, and there's the L storm. And here's our area of high pressure. Now notice we have the cold front, which I drew in right here, coming through the Ohio Valley. So here in the bottom right image, this is now 48 hours. So this is a Tuesday morning. Notice that Jerry's being pulled northward and it's going to slam it to the front. It's going to kick it out to sea. Karen is still holding on as it tracks towards Puerto Rico. And there's the L storm passing to the south and east of the Cape Verde Islands. All right, if we look at the upper air map, we can see that this is for 54 hours. This is Monday night, Tuesday morning. And there's Jerry being pulled out to sea right here. And there's a big short wave coming in very strong through the Great Lakes with the next cold front. So that's going to pull that system out to sea, no doubt about it. Now here's the next piece of energy in the southwestern states and also turning very cold finally in Canada. That's a good sign. Remember, you have to get it cold in Canada before you get it cold in the United States. That's just the way it works, folks. Let me take a look at the next slide here once. All right, here, this is now for 72 hours. And we can see that Jerry has now been pulled north with a big low over Canadian Maritime provinces. There's Karen north of Puerto Rico. It's also headed north. And there's the L storm you can see there in this far eastern Atlantic Ocean. And here's our next cold front. I want to point that out to you. Right here, you can see that very nicely. With a black line. It's supposed to be a black line there. So now is Karen going to get pulled north or is Karen going to turn back to the west? Well, that's really what some uncertainty. A lot of meteorologists are talking about that this afternoon and this evening. Now, this next image shows the upper air map for Wednesday. And we can see what's happening here is Jerry is now gone out to sea. And the L storm, this storm which came off the coast of Africa here, is now being here. And there's a weakness in the jet stream right there. So this is going to probably turn into the weakness. Now, if this ridge were to extend all the way to the Bahamas, that would be different. But that's not what we have. That's not what we have here at all. So there's a clear weakness right here. So this L storm is going to be pulled this way. But Karen is now running into a problem because the ridge is beginning to build here over the southwest Atlantic Ocean. So we'll see how that plays out in just a second. This next slide, this is again 108 hours. We can see that Karen is now very clearly right here. And what's happening is, as this energy is coming down into the west coast of the United States, this ridge is going to start increasing dramatically. And now this is a big pool of cold area. This is really finally below normal heights, bringing the cold air into Canada for the first time in quite a while. Way late. You know, Canada usually has a frost at Canadian prairies by early mid-September, and so far they haven't had anything at all, and it really surprised a lot of people. But Canada has really stayed quite warm for this late in the season, but that's going to change over the next several days. Now, this is again, this is valid for Friday evening, and we can see that the pattern here has changed dramatically. We have this huge dome right here. See this enormous dome, a big trough here on the west coast. There's that big ridge here. And now here's the L storm. This is the one which formed off Africa, right? You know, it's about to form Africa. And it's now turning into the open Atlantic Ocean. But Karen is here. And this enormous dome of high pressure is going to block it. And it may force it to turn to the west. Let me show you. These are the ensembles. And this is the storm coming off Africa. So these tracks here referring to this system here. See it? That's what we're talking about. Okay. So you can clearly see all the models are taking this out to sea, turning it sharply into the open waters of the eastern Atlantic Ocean. Now after that, this is where it gets tricky. Here, this upper image shows valid for 96 hours and 144 hours. And we can see Jerry is being pulled northward. But look what happens to Karen. Let me highlight it in case you can't see it. There it is north of Puerto Rico and then begins to turn to the west. Why? Because this enormous high pressure is building in and the high pressure is blocking it, so it's being turned this direction. And meanwhile, the L storm, you see this trough cold front here? That's going to grab it, no doubt about it, and it's going to pull it out to sea. And that's what the models are showing here. That's what those models are showing, so it's going to go out to sea. Now, this is the upper air map for 7 days from now. We can clearly see the Karen storm very nicely here in the Bahamas again. And we have this enormous dome right here. Look at this monster. If this was July or early August, this would be Temperatures way above 100 degrees over much of the eastern half of the country. You also have a huge block developing over Greenland. But look at this enormous trough here. Somebody said to me, well, Dave, if we have a block over Greenland, we have to have a trough in the east. No, you don't. That's not correct. That's not correct at all. So now we do have a big ridge developing in the Gulf of Alaska, pushing into northwest Canada. So again, if you can imagine what the pattern's going to look like, let me change my marker here for a second. So get a nice color here. If this feature were to go away, you would have this. If this feature goes away, the ridge here goes away, and then you end up getting this big trough because of the block over Greenland. So we've got to get this thing out of place, and so far it's not going anywhere. So that's what's really screwing up the pattern. Now here is a day 7 on the operational European of the tropics map, and you can see Karen's headed for Florida. High pressure is over just off the Virginia and Maryland, New Jersey coast, blocking it, and the L storm is headed out into the open Atlantic Ocean. And these are the ensembles. This is the European ensemble from this morning. You can see it clearly turns to the left because of the enormous high, which is going to be situated right here, blocking it. And the GFS is showing the same sort of thing. That's really unusual. Usually GFS screws this sort of thing up. But the new GFS, I got to tell you, it's been doing a little better with the hurricanes and the hurricane tracks. This new FV3 GFS, since they tinkered with it, I think it's doing a lot better with hurricanes and the hurricane tracks. So the agreement here is really strong for this far out in time, I got to tell you. And it should be, given the overall pattern. I mean, this is pretty obvious that any hurricane, which is the Bahamas, is going to be forced to turn to the west here, if this is correct. Now, this is the upper air pattern for day 9. And again, look at this enormous dome of high pressure, this huge ridge in the jet stream. At the surface, huge high pressure, but the dome is very powerful. You can clearly see it right here. That is just a monster feature. And look at this enormous trough still running from Manitoba all the way down to California. So that's pulling a cold air into the Rockies and Canada, which is great. And the jet stream is going north of Chicago almost into Maine. Now this is a pretty warm pattern. It appears to everybody east of the Mississippi River. And we can look at these temperatures. Now this is for Friday, September 28th. You can see how warm it is. 90s in the deep south, 80 into Des Moines. That's pretty warm for this time of year. 85 in St. Louis, 84 in Indianapolis, 81 in Richmond, 87 in Raleigh. And the bottom right image is Sunday. Look how warm it is. Almost 90 degrees in Richmond again. And then you can see 85 in Des Moines, 88 in St. Louis. Remember, this is late September, October temperatures, what they should be. This is not what it should be at all. So this is a very impressive warmth. And then here we can see this is, excuse me, September 30th. Look at the heat over the Tennessee Valley. In Chicago, St. Louis, Columbus, Indiana, Kansas City. I mean, very impressive stuff. And then even October 2nd, it hasn't cooled off yet. So this is a warm, relatively, it's not 90 degrees in some places, but it's pretty warm. Excuse me. And in the deep south, it's really warm. It's really warm, as you can see. Very, very impressive temperatures, way above normal for this time of year. Now, we talked about this pattern here, bringing the cold air into Canada, and we can show you how warm it has been in Canada. This is the forecast. This is this morning temperatures in Canada, I should say. Now, remember, this is in centigrade. So 10 degrees centigrade is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. So, for example, this is 50 degrees here. Okay, that's 50 degrees here. That's 50 degrees this morning. That's 54 degrees. Okay, that's 48 degrees. It's, as you can see, very mild mid-September morning in Canada. But that changes. This is Saturday morning and Sunday morning. You can see 0, -1 centigrade, -2 along the U.S.-Canada border, southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, Manitoba, finally getting the cold air in place into Canada. And this is a big deal, finally ending their growing season. And if Canada starts getting cold, then the U.S. can start getting cold. It's just, you just have to get Canada cold first. That's just the way it's got to be. All right. Now, in terms of the heat for the East Coast, now even though the pattern here looks extremely warm, look at that enormous dome here over Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. We may get a backdoor cold front over the Northeast. This is the European ensemble. You can see that for Friday evening, we have high pressure. It comes in across Canada into New England, and it drives easterly winds down the coast. Let me change my marker here so you can see this. and it drives the winds in this direction, easterly down the coast. So we get a backdoor cold front, and the cold front goes all the way down into Georgia or Florida maybe, and temperatures are not quite as hot as they normally could be. Now the heat is really pretty much west of the Appalachian Mountains, and it happens again on the September 30th, October 1st, another high over Maine. Even though you can see this enormous blob, this enormous dome in the jet stream. Look at the orange right here. See that? It's huge. That should be producing temperatures in the 90s in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina. But because we have this high pressure over New England and Maine, we're getting low-level easterly winds, which keep us from getting 90 plus. Still warm, just not as warm as it could be. So that's the good news, if that's correct. All right, and here's a sea surface temperature map. I enlarged this so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the current sea surface temperatures, and you can clearly see it alters. This is the exact pattern we're talking about. That is, that's this. You can see how the two patterns almost match perfectly. See that? Now, if we get the big trough of the west coast out of here, then what's going to happen is we're going to get a pattern which is going to look like this. And we'll be in business. There's the blocking over Greenland, but we got to get that trough on the west coast out of here. There is no sign of it leaving, unfortunately. This is the day 15 European model. It's not as warm as, next week. It's a little cooler, but it's still not a cold pattern at all. Here's the 16 to 20 day CFS, and you can see that it's a little colder here. We're getting a little more blocking over Greenland, a bit of a trough here now in Canada. There's some blocking over Greenland, so it's a little colder. Okay, this is October, takes us to October 7th, 8th, 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th. It's a little colder, but still not impressive. When and if is it going to change? This is the experimental MJO. Go back to here, and you can see that by October 20th, the MJO experimental runs take us into phase 3 and then phase 4. And you can see it gets into phase 2. So this is the 15th of October, phase 2, and then maybe October 22nd, phase 3. Now, why is that important? Well, in the month of October, when you're in phase 1, you can see, which you are right now, which is going to be, we're in phase A going to phase 1. You can see how warm it is. Look at the overall pattern. It's amazing how this stuff works. Look how warm it is in the eastern United States. Okay? And there's the rain, is a pretty wet pattern as well. Okay, and if you want to know if that's going to work or not, look at the models, or look at the models I've been showing here. That's what this is. I mean, come on. It works like it's unbelievably well how this all meshes together. And then look at phase 2. You remember we talked about getting to phase 2? Okay, suppose it does. Now we get cold in the eastern U.S. finally. Rain on the east coast, then it gets chilly. That's phase 2 in October. This is phase 3. Okay, back to normal temperatures and fairly dry conditions. So, after October 10th, October 15th, that's when it flips. That's when it changes. That's when we start getting sustained, cool, mid-October conditions. Not until then, from what I can see. Not until then. Finally, last point about the hurricane season. Here's our 200 millibar for velocity potential anomalies. Again, the green stuff means hurricane activity in this area. And again, you can see South America. This is the Atlantic Ocean, so the two things correlate. Okay, so this is all rising motion. This is September 21, 26, October 10th, October 6th, October 11th. Sometime around the 16th, middle of October, it shuts off. We move out of the green to the yellow, which is sinking air. So the activity in the far eastern Atlantic is going to shut down. But probably not until then. So I think we may have an extended Cape Verde season into the first week of October, as opposed to usually shutting down. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm working on the winter preview forecast. I should have it out tomorrow, the first equinox autumn, what we call astronomical autumn tomorrow. So look forward to that, and we'll see how it works out. This is DT from Weather Risk. I'll talk to you soon.